I'm with Striving for Eternity Ministries, and we're a discipling ministry, so there's some resources in the back I'll mention maybe later. But, you know, I have one of the more controversial topics in the book, Sharing the Good News with Mormons. So let me start it this way. Actually, what I should do is start my own clock, because...
I'll give you a 5-minute warning.
Yeah, sure. So, you know, I recently saw a video. I don't know if you guys, if any of you saw this. It was amazing. I watched adult men grabbing young children, by the feet, grabbing some by their arms, swinging them around, knocking them down. And you know, if you're like me, you think, man, how could a grown man do it to infant, like 2, 3, 4-year-old kids? Till all of a sudden you realize, and you can go search on this. I was going to play it, but they're way too long. Go search, Dad's Saving the Day. And you see a father grabbing a child that's falling out of a tree by its arm or its leg. Immediately we think, when I first describe it, you're going, wow, how can an adult man do that to a child? And yet the reality is, to save that child's life, it's suddenly a good thing, isn't it? Suddenly what we might think, oh, that didn't sound so good. Well, the child could have, you know, there's one where you actually see the fathers, you know, running down a hill after they're in the little car, and they like grabs the baby right out of the way. It's fun to watch those. So, but if I put that video up here, you'd be totally distracted watching that. But, you know, I have a chapter on open air evangelism. Now in there I say it's not open air preaching, it's not street preaching. Have any of you seen street preachers? What do you think of them? Okay, hold your tongue. I agree with you. Most of the people that I see on the streets do a horrible job representing Jesus Christ. And I'm saying this as a well-known street preacher. Okay, I don't like the way most of them do it. I do it in New York City. Okay, so I get to deal with a lot of great entertainment while preaching. I get 2 guys in tutus dancing in front of me. It's entertaining. But the reality is that when we do this, it has a very, very negative effect. And the reason I call it open air evangelism is because I want to distinguish myself. It's actually the term that I came up with in 84, before it really became, or 94, before it became popular. And I actually thought when we first came up with this book, and Eric mentioned yesterday, you know, that I was really pushing to get this published by a publisher and get it to a broader audience. And then all of a sudden he sends out this letter. We got a publisher, and we just want some of you guys to know that the editors, the publishers take over, and your chapter could be cut. And I went, I'm doing open air evangelism. There's no way my chapter's making it. I had Sean McDowell on my podcast. I don't know, you guys probably all listen to the Rappaport, right? That podcast. Look, I don't know if you have to listen to the Rappaport podcast to go to heaven, but why take the chance? I'm just saying. And so I had Sean on. I was like, I thought for sure you guys were going to cut this one. Like, this is the most controversial topic. And, you know, it is one that you end up seeing a lot of controversy over. But the thing is, I can reach more people in 1 hour of open air preaching, open air evangelism, than I can handing out tracts or doing one-to-one conversations. If you get a good crowd, you can reach a lot more people. But here's the thing, and you've already heard this. If you were here last week and you heard, you know, Rob Savoca's message, if you heard the beforehand, they're saying, you know, the great thing of open air preaching or open air evangelism is not the guy that's usually up there standing on a box. It's the gathering of the crowd for you guys to be able to share the gospel. And what I want to do is give some practical things today. There are some people that should not be doing open air evangelism. Okay? If you want to win a debate, please don't open air. If you want to show that you're prideful and you know more than someone else, please find a different way. Like, just hand out tracts and don't say anything. Okay? Because the reality is that we see those guys and they don't represent Christ well. My goal is that we would be ambassadors of Christ before we win debates or anything that we're going to end up doing on the streets. And so we have to realize that we are representing Jesus Christ when we stand out on a street corner or, here at Manti, and we're going to lift up our voice and proclaim the Word of God. What we have to do is make sure we're proclaiming the Word of God and not the words of us. There's plenty of people that you see out there that want to be known. I've seen the guys that are giving out their YouTube channel when they're doing open air. And they want to make sure they get the hits to their YouTube channel where all they're doing is doing open air. I don't care if anyone remembers my name on the street. I do care if they know Jesus Christ. That's important. So I want to give some practical things. Now, you heard earlier today the mentioning of the fact that it's how do we get into good conversations? What I want to do with you, we'll do this live and it'll be a lot of fun. I am known for doing something that I do at conferences we run or on my podcast. And I have been doing this for 30 years. So I'm just saying, if I happen to do well, it's only because I have a lot of experience. Okay? If I do bad, it's because, well, I'm good at doing bad. I'm going to ask any one of you to give me something. So it's the first person that hasn't something they think I cannot transition to the gospel. Some object, something, a topic, and I'm going to stand in front of you and try to transition from whatever you give me to the gospel.
Styrofoam.
She had her hand up. A pen?
A toothbrush.
Oh, a toothbrush. Okay, so here's the thing, and the reason I'm doing this is I want you guys to realize that with practice you can transition from anything, even a toothbrush, to the gospel. So I'm seeing someone with a toothbrush. How am I going to get to the gospel from a toothbrush? Well, it's kind of easy because the reality is, why do we use a toothbrush? Huh? To clean your teeth, but why? Because it decays. We have decay happening every single night in our mouth, don't we? That's why the first thing people want to do is brush their teeth to get rid of the odor that's there. Why is that? Because that is the effect of decay in the world. And there's a reason we have decay in the world. The reason we have decay in the world is because our federal head, Adam, chose to disobey God. And because of that, all of us have a sin nature. And we sit under God's judgment. And we will be judged by God. It's appointed unto man once to die, and then the judgment. Do you think you're good enough to go to heaven? From a toothbrush. Okay? This is the thing. We can all do this with practice. By the way, for youth groups, I do this at my church with the youth group. And the thing is, you end up finding everyone else has their own way of transitioning. But where does that really help? Well, this is a practical thing when I do open air. I don't know what's going to happen in front of me. Whether it's two guys in tutus, or if it's going to be as what happened at UConn, and if you just go look for a video, UConn professor goes ape, you'll see it was kind of entertaining with him. But I ended up having three guys doing a Jewish dance, and I didn't hear it until I actually saw the video, that they were trying to do a dance. And one guy says, hey, is there any other Jewish people out here? What these guys didn't know is that the preacher was Jewish. I knew the dance. So I grabbed the ringleader and just started doing the dance with him. It's a Russian dance where you kind of get down the proper way. You get down real low and you kick your legs out if you've ever seen it. But I use that. I have people that will do the most craziest things, but I'm going to take whatever they give me and transition it to the gospel and keep coming back to it. And that's my goal over and over, is not to, the thing with open air is to have a crowd. Okay? And there's an effective way to get a crowd and an ineffective way. In New York, we used to have this guy. His name's Greg. And this is how he would start his open air. He'd get up and he'd say, hi, my name's Greg. I used to be a homosexual pig like you dogs. Oh. Now, did he get a crowd? Oh, yeah. And you know what the guy that had the permit, you know what he used to do? My job was to follow him to calm the crowd down. Great, that's really what I want to do. But the reality is that there's a different way of doing it. They actually planned a riot because of him. I say they planned it because the police were already there. And actually this one guy, Robert, who practices homosexuality, actually grabbed me and dragged me away once Greg got up. And I'm like, dude, what's up? And he goes, that. And I look over my shoulder, there was a whole mob scene. I realized here is a guy who hates the Christian preachers. Yet he dragged me away, and I said, why? He said, I didn't want you to get hurt. You see, there was a thing of going to the same place year after year. I've been going to Union Square in New York City going on 14 years now. If any of you, I know some have been to Union Square and know what that's like. It's a zoo. You get every spiritual thing out there. Everyone's spiritual out there. And the reality is that what you end up seeing is people who hate the gospel. And yet by going year after year after year, those people I've gotten to know. And they will protect me. Why? Because the way that we conduct ourselves makes a difference. You've heard it. If you've got the book, Sharing the Good News with Mormons, you're going to see this over and over. Asking questions. Okay, it's going to be in my chapter, whichever number it is, I forget. But the thing you're going to end up seeing is the power of questions is essential. Especially if you're going to do open air. When you have someone that gives you a challenge. I had a guy in New York that said, there is no God because there's evil in the world. Now, as a Christian, do we have the answer to that? Does he have an answer to that? You see, he never thought about that. So you know what I did? I said, excuse me, but can you tell me how you can have evil without God? I asked a question. He goes, well, what's evil? I said, I didn't say it exists. You did. Where am I putting all the burden? On the guy that made the claim. I said, can you explain to me how you can have evil without God? He's like, well, I don't know. Tell me what evil is. I said, okay. Evil is the opposite of good, and good is defined by the nature of God, so how can you have evil without God? And he threw up his hands and walked out. You know what? He never had to deal with it because he just threw out the challenges. But the question reversed the burden of proof, and it made him actually have to think about things. Now, I want to do some things practical, because when you do see a good open-air evangelist out there, there's some things you can actually do to help. I know some folks saw when Aaron was started doing some open-air last night. You know, one of the best things you could do as Christians is not stand behind him, but stand in front of him, facing him. You know why? A crowd creates a crowd. Okay, so if he's out there doing that tonight, go and stand in front of him. Even take video of him, that's fine, because that gets people curious. And what happens is then there becomes a crowd. And then you know what you do? You just kind of work your way out of the crowd. And get to the back of the crowd. Let them get closer in here. And what you do is, one thing you don't want to do is, if there's a person standing here and you want to ask them, hey, what do you think about what that guy is saying? Don't turn this way. Never turn where your back is to the preacher or your side is to the person up there. You know why? It ends up dividing the crowd. But stand, just turn your head. And just say, and the best part of someone that's doing open air evangelism is that it makes it easy for you to transition. Because guess what? Who's ever up there already did it for you. And they don't even have to know that you're with them. You could sit there. I had one time where we sat there and talking to this Muslim guy. And I said, what do you think about what that guy's saying? And he's telling me he's a Muslim, why he's disagreeing. And I start talking to him. And we're having a whole conversation. And then all of a sudden, my buddy Ken just says, Andrew, you're up. And the Muslim guy said, what? He didn't know I was with him. Right? I mean, that's one of the nice things. You don't even have to pretend. I mean, you don't even have to show that you're in agreement with the guy that's doing the proclamation. You're just gathering that information and sharing the gospel. And often you just go, well, I think what he's saying is right. I mean, he's quoting the Bible there. You hope he's quoting the Bible at least. Right? I mean, it gives you where you're just starting that conversation. One of the things I always tell people is that evangelism is a conversation, not a presentation. Yeah. The person you're speaking to will figure out which one you're doing very quickly. Okay? If you're just there to give a presentation, I got my points, you'll see they have their eyes darting away like, how do I get out of here quickly? Right? They don't want to be there. You know what's always amazing is I had one person who once said, he said, well, I really got to go because I got my girlfriend's waiting for me. 45 minutes later, I'm like, your girlfriend's going to be yelling at you later. Right? Why? An enjoyable conversation. The thing we want to do is let the gospel be the offense and not us. We should be doing everything we can to get ourselves out of the way of being an offense. And I use humor to do that. Now, I have an advantage over you guys. One of the things I found is that making fun of yourself really does ease their defensiveness, and it somehow deludes people into thinking that you're a very humble person. Now, I have that advantage over most of you because I have a lot of material on stupid things I do, and therefore, I have lots to draw from. You guys don't have as much, I understand. But the thing is you want to use humor. You want to keep the conversation lighthearted. You know, I'll sit there and I'll have a person say, I'll ask them, have you ever stolen something? And they'll say, yeah. So what does that make you? And they'll say, a stealer. That's a football team in Pittsburgh. Right? You know, so you can use things like that. Now, I have told that joke probably 1,000 times. You know, they've only heard it once. So, you know, we want to realize when we do stuff like this as a crowd, we want to be sensitive to the person who's up there. Now, if I'm up there, and as was said earlier in kind of the guidelines for Manti, is, you know, not to interrupt, not to steal someone away. Don't interrupt someone else's conversation. You really don't want to do that with me because I play dumb. It comes natural. I'm very skilled at it, but I play dumb. If you get Greg Kokel's book, Tactics, he'll talk about the Columbo tactic. It's beautiful. It is the most fun because you can play dumb and pretend like you don't know anything and let them be the teacher and just ask question after question after question. You get them. There was a guy at Montclair State University. He's like, well, see, the problem is the Bible was edited in the 1500s. And they replaced it. Took all the Bibles, they collected them everywhere in the world, and they collected them, and they replaced them with an edited copy. And I was like, oh, gee, you know, I may not be the smartest guy, but I'm not sure how exactly that works. Let's take his school newspaper for an example. It turns out he was the photographer of the paper. Great. 1,100 copies get produced that morning at 11 o'clock. I said, if we were to collect all of the copies of the school paper, where would we go? He goes, well, right there in that pile. I said, where else? You know, he's like, well, dorm rooms. Where else? People's cars. Where else? And I kept going until he finally said the trash. Because the trash is the greatest place to find it. Right? If someone edit it, guess what happens? They're not going to edit the ones that they put in the trash, right? So we're going through and I said, okay, if I wanted to do this, I'm going to take these, wouldn't I have to collect all of these and then replace them with an edited copy? I said, how could I do that? He goes, well, you couldn't do that. I said, but this was just produced at 11 o'clock today. I mean, you're talking about a Bible that they supposedly edited 1,500 years later where we have, you know, just in the Greek, 6,000 or 7,000 copies. Actually, nowadays, the up newer numbers about 8,000 manuscripts from all over the world. How could that have happened? He goes, you know, this isn't making much sense to me. I said, you know, it wasn't making sense to me, but I'm glad we agree. You know, and I could play dumb. And so I will do that because, you know, the reality is that when you're up there doing open air, that helps keep a crowd there, keeps them entertained. There is an element for the crowd that they are not there to learn about where they're going to spend eternity. They're there to be entertained. Okay? Don't do entertainment for entertainment's sake. We're not there to entertain them, but we do use that. There's things that you'll have where people will do things that you, like I had a guy, and you could, trying to think what there's a YouTube video that we have, a demon-possessed heckler is what it's called. And there's a guy, Will, and he said, where there's a will, his name was Will, and he said, where there's a will, there's a way. That's how he's going to get to heaven. You know, Will was, he was just strange. I'll just leave it at that. He told me afterwards he was demon-possessed. Had 5 demons in him. God the Father, Jesus, the Holy Spirit, Muhammad, and Allah. Okay. So, so he was just erratic. But you know what? Every time I'd just go, hey, where there's a will, there's a way, you'd see him calm down. Just that silly little humor. You want to use things like that. Some things to help with open air, if you're going to do it, is elevate. Okay? You want to elevate yourself. There's a couple reasons. One, it actually acts as protection. Okay? Now, sometimes you'll get the claim, someone will say, well, you just think you're above us. Okay? When I get that claim, I say, no, I just want to be heard. I said, you're probably, and I say this to people all the time, you may be a far more moral person than me. But it's not my morality that gets me heaven. I'm not above you. Morally, I'm not above you. But we don't get to heaven. We don't get a right state with God from our morals. And so elevating helps. It helps to get your voice heard. One of the other things that helps is, well, sit-ups help. Anyone that's been in the military, running while having to do cadences helps. Because what you end up doing is you want to speak from your diaphragm, not your voice. Right now I'm speaking from my voice. I'm going to step back from the mic. I hope not to blow his mic. But now I'm going to speak from my diaphragm. I'm a lot louder, aren't I? I've actually had the police called on me for amplifying. The officer comes over, you have to stop amplifying, sir. I can't, sir. I have a lunginator. I just can't take it out, you know. Rutgers University, we had the police officer was out there, and we had an off-duty officer who went over to talk to the on-duty officer, and the call actually came in. Look, we know he's amplifying. They're hearing him 3 buildings away. No, he's. I'm looking right at him. He has no amplification. He's just that loud. Brown University, a friend of mine, Scott Smith, he was running, he does an outreach to all the Ivy Leagues each year, and I was with him, and the police told us we had to stop amplifying. And Scott says, well, officer, can we get as loud as we want as long as we don't amplify? He goes, sure. So Scott calls me over, Andrew, you're up, we want you to get as loud as you can get. And I'm like looking at the like, yeah, you're getting me in trouble, right? You're trying to set me up to get arrested today, is that it? So I'm like, officer, I can get as loud as I want. He goes, sure. So I start preaching. The officer actually admitted that I was louder than the amplification, but he figured I was the only one that could get that loud. You know, with practice, you can. I mean, you got to remember, I do this on a weekly basis. So I build up the muscles to do that. Preaching from the diaphragm helps. Being able to speak where you're pushing the air up. You can actually go, the longest I have done open air is 3.5 straight hours. And the only reason I could go that long is because I was preaching from the diaphragm. If I'm speaking from my voice, I'd probably last about maybe an hour. Maybe. Because it starts getting dry, and then you're all hoarse the next day. So learning how to speak, and where you're pushing the air up is going to help. Hate this point, but yes, sit-ups do help with that. Helps build your diaphragm muscles. One of the things also I really want to encourage, if anyone does want to try this, is you need to be respectful to the crowd. And one of the most important ways to be respectful is to answer their questions. Now, I can answer any question that you have about God and the Bible. I can, because I think I don't know is a perfectly good answer. And I say it all the time. You know, I don't know. You didn't answer my question. Sure I did. I just answered it. I don't know. But I'll try to find an answer for you. Give me your email address. Oh. Don't you want the answer to your question? You know, when you do that, people all of a sudden now the crowd realizes, oh wait, he's really just challenging that guy. He doesn't really have questions for that guy. Okay? I have 2 goals when I do open air. And okay, I'll admit this, I'm going to get myself in trouble. This is being recorded. The editors kind of softened it. I understand. I have 2 goals. One, I want to proclaim the gospel unadulterated. I don't want to water it down in any way. But I have a second goal. I want to get one professing atheist to tell another professing atheist to shut up. Now, it wasn't worded that way in the book. They softened that last part. But that's my goal. I want to get someone who hates the message of the gospel to tell another person to shut up. Why? Because I want to show so much respect to the people. You know, one of the things I do to manage a crowd and show respect at the same time, you'll get several people shouting at you, and I'll usually turn to whoever was, asked the question first. Sir, excuse me, she asked the question first, show some respect. Right? What am I doing? I'm asking him to show respect to her. But I'm also asking the whole crowd to do that. And when someone else will shout out, can you wait your turn? This person's asking a question. He was here first, or he was waiting. And I'm just taking them one at a time. You know, it keeps it from having everyone shouting at you. But it also shows respect and gets the crowd to see it. You're trying to show respect to them. You're trying to answer their questions. So that's a really important thing to do. You never want to interrupt a heckler. If you have one person that is heckling the preacher, let the preacher deal with it. If you have an experienced preacher, or if you're trying this and you don't know how to handle the heckler, the easiest thing to do this is why you always want to have multiple people with you. Okay? The easiest thing to do is, I had a friend of mine, Robert, he didn't want to have to deal on a college campus with the issue of homosexuality publicly. Okay, so what did he do? He just turned, someone said, what do you think about homosexuality? He goes, hey, my friend Andrew over here, he'd love to talk to you about it. I did not want to love to talk about it. But hey, he'll talk to you. And what do you do? Just push that guy right off. Now I'm in a one-on-one conversation. It's not there for, for everyone. Now the preacher who's up there on the box, he doesn't have to deal with it. Right? And so that's something you can do. But there's times where you want to have a heckler. There are some hecklers that by ignoring them, they build a crowd. They're there to be heard. I was just in Cleveland, and we had this, it just happened to be after, we planned it anyway. It wasn't because they had a gay pride parade. But they had a gay pride parade when we were doing our event. And so we were out there, okay? There was one gentleman that by ignoring him, man, he got louder and louder and louder and built the crowd bigger and bigger and bigger. And then I finally answered his questions. Okay, he really didn't have a very intelligent question. He didn't actually know the material that he was going over. He wanted to talk about the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. He didn't realize that I actually studied some of that. And so he didn't quite realize I knew more than him, which wasn't so good for him. But the thing is that one of the advantages of being able to learn some of these practical things with doing this is you will be able to gather people to listen to the proclamation of the gospel. You make it easier for the people who are with you to share the gospel one-on-one or hand out tracts. Now, you don't want, if there's a big crowd, you don't want to interject and cut someone off. There are some people who will listen to someone proclaiming God's word, but will never have a one-on-one conversation with you and will not take a gospel tract. So be sensitive to that. I watched in New York one gentleman for 3 hours who is watching each of the different guys get up and do the open-air evangelism. And soon as the first person went to give the guy a gospel tract, the guy left. So there are going to be people like that. So what you do is you kind of stay on the outside and look for the people that, and you can watch, if you're like people watching, you'll love doing open-air evangelism. It's great. So what you do is you just watch, you'll see the people that start peeling off. Look for the person that's just about to leave the crowd, and go to that person, then go hand them a tract. Because they're already getting ready to leave. Okay? So those would be some things that I wanted to give you guys, just some practical things that are not in the book. Because I expect that all of you got the book, Sharing the Good News with Mormons.
Yep.
Okay, let me try that again. So you're all going to go in the back and buy from Mormon Research Ministry today the book, Sharing the Good News with Mormons. You read my chapter. If you listen to the message that Rob did last week, he covered some of this as well. I want to leave you with a couple of resources so you have them. Tomorrow you really want to make sure you're here because Sandra Tanner's speaking. Yeah. Don't worry because Matt Slick's speaking, so you're going to get a nap. Okay. Everyone, bring their pillows. Anyone who has not seen Matt and I together, when we get together, you'll understand. Actually, just tell Matt I said that, and it'll be fun. But he needs 2 bells, by the way. Just saying. But here he's going to talk on biblical reliability. Okay, I have a book in the back. It'll be more updated information than anything Matt's going to have. He's just going to start off and then just wander around on different topics. So I have a book back there, What Do We Believe? It is a Christian systematic theology, great for people who don't want those really thick books on systematic theology. And basically it's not just a starter, but it's also a quick reference for people. But I really think the second chapter in that on biblical reliability is one of the most important ones because of the fact that this is a topic we're dealing with, whether you're dealing with Mormons, atheists, almost anybody it doesn't believe that the Bible can be trusted today. And the other book I have back there is What Do They Believe, which is a systematic theology of the major Western religions. It's going to go over Judaism, my background. It'll do with Catholicism, Islam, Mormonism, Jehovah's Witness, Christianity. It's going to look at 6 doctrines from their resources. It's going to look at what's their view of their authority, the view of God's Trinity, the deity of Christ, man's sinfulness, salvation, and then where it's the eternal state. And so the reason I put that one together is because most people misrepresent other people's views. I didn't want that. So what did I do? I actually wrote these books. I went to imams, I went to different people and said, am I accurate in what you believe? Okay, so the Mormon person I gave it to said, well, we don't really say this. But is it what you actually believe? Well, we don't like people to know that. Yeah, it's staying in the book. So if you have questions about doing open air evangelism, I encourage you not to go on YouTube for examples. They're probably wrong. But you could contact me, or you could go to livingwaters.com, and they have Ray does a great job along with his team in bringing a good example of how to do it. So thanks for your time.